Hey everyone, I want to give you guys some quick things that you can do with your kids if they're learning fractions. This could be done all the way from second grade to up to as far as I'll probably make my seventh grader do it too. It's just a fun game. One of the things that I did when I was a teacher was concepts and skills that often confused and frustrated kids. I always searched for games that they could play to build confidence before we started working on it. So I'm going to give you a game that's called Closest to One or Closest to Zero. It's depending on how you want to play, and it involves construction paper, dice, scissors, and a marker. So we most of the time can find those things. If you don't have construction paper at your house, you'll just need strips of just regular paper and maybe have your kid color those, because it is pretty good to have different colors to look at. So I have my construction paper, and we're just going to start with just some strips that are all the same width size of rectangle. And you're going to start with just one. So this piece of paper right here is just going to represent one whole. So this is always going to be our frame of reference of like what equals a whole. So for example, when you're doing pizza, you have a whole pizza, and then however many pieces you have, like if one gets taken out. So this is our whole. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to write down all the different ways that we could say one. So it could be the number one, right? Number one. Or this is the whole thing. It's the whole dang piece. Another way that you can write whole is you can write it as a fraction. It's 1 over 1. 1 over 1 is still a whole. And then another way that you could write that is actually those three ways, okay? So that's how we're going to write it. You could also write it as 1.0. So this would be more so for your older kids. If you're doing younger kids, you're probably just going to put like the number one, and then this represents a whole. These are all saying the same things. They're all synonyms. This is one, a whole thing equals one, 1 over 1 equals 1, 1.0 equals 1, okay? The next thing you're going to do is you're going to take your second strip of paper, and you're going to fold it in half. And you want to make it as close to half as possible. And granted, these are things that your kids can do. Like, you're not doing this project for them. I'm making this as an example for you, but I actually have my kids do this because this is part of the learning process. So you're going to fold it in half, and then we're going to cut it, right? Because it's going to be half. So I'm going to cut it right down the middle of where I folded on. You can even see how crappy I am at like doing this. It's like not exactly. And so when the kids have these papers, they can see that the orange is a whole, right? Like that's our one piece. And this represents half. It's going to cover half of it. So we're going to write down all the ways that you could put half. So number one, we're going to write the word half. This is half a piece. This is also written as a fraction. It's 1/2, or for older kids, you write it also known as a decimal, is 0.5. And you're going to write that on both sheets of paper. Okay, half, 1/2, 0.5. So now we have a whole, we have half, and I have two of these. And so whenever I ask kids like things like equivalents, like how many halves does it take to make a whole? Well, there's one, here's two. 2 halves make a whole, right? So it makes sense. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on fourths. So I'm going to take another sheet of paper, and I'm going to fold it in half, right? And then I'm going to fold it in half one more time. Then when we open it up, we're going to have 4 pieces. And this is going to represent our fourths. So then cut along those lines. And you're going to do the same thing that you did on the other ones. You're going to write what each one of the individual pieces are to represent. So this little teeny tiny piece compared to the whole, okay, because we're always going to take it back to the whole, and this piece is going to represent 1/4. So like this is really great for kids to use comparing in fractions. Like what's bigger, 1 whole or 1/4? Well, let's grab 1 whole, let's grab 1/4. Like, oh, 1 whole is way bigger, right? But the standard is all of these pieces together are going to make up that 1 whole because they have to be the same size, right? So on this, I'm going to write down 1/4. I'm going to write it down in words. 1/4. And I'm going to write it down as a decimal for older kids because we do have older kids, and that's going to be 0.25. Okay, so I'm going to do that for every single piece. So now I have my 1 whole piece. I have my 2 halves, which make a whole. And then I'm going to have 4 of these fourths on there. Okay, and then one of the next time that you're going to do this is, guess what we're going to do? We're going to fold it in half. We're going to fold it in half again. and we're going to fold it in half again. You ready? Anybody want to guess what this is going to be? Like I do that with my kids. So now you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These are going to represent 8s. So then you're going to cut all those through, right? I'm not going to do all of them. You get the gist. I'm going to label it 1/8. I'm going to write it as words in word form. I think I just spelled that wrong. Yeah, I did. I just squeezed it in there. If you make mistakes, don't make deal. And then 1/8 as a fraction. Oh, 8 over, I'm like drawing a brain fart. I'm gonna have to look that up. Can you believe that? So we're just gonna leave it like that for now because 0.25 is 1/4. I can't remember what 1/8 is. I'll have to look it up and we'll add that fraction on there again. Because we don't really use 1/8 in decimal points that much, okay? So this is another way to start comparing. What's bigger, 1/4 or 1/8? Well, let's look at those. What's bigger? You can also ask, how many 8s does it take to make 1/4? Well, it's gonna take 2 8s. So you're gonna do the same thing with this paper. You're gonna cut it, you're gonna label each one of the pieces, okay? That's gonna get that in your kid's head of like, this is it. Last one, okay? So this one is going to help also, can help with measurements because when you're looking at a ruler, you look at halves, fourths, eighths, and sixteenths. Most rulers have sixteenths. So this is a great opportunity is after they practice this, like look at a ruler for your older kids and see what the sizes are and have them count the lines. Now, my pieces of construction paper are shorter than what I would use at school. So like my 16th pieces are gonna be really tiny, okay? So open that back up. There's my 16th. So I'm gonna cut it off. It's really teeny tiny. And guess what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna label it. Not with the decimal, obviously, because I can't remember what a 1/8 is. And it's gonna be really hard to get that squeezed in. So then I'm gonna have this on here. So here's how you play the game, okay? You have all your pieces sitting out. I'm gonna clip this down a little bit. So here's my one whole piece right here. And I'm gonna have that there. So what I wanna do is I'm gonna have a dice, and on the dice, you can take like little stickers and you can put them on there. And so you're gonna have 1/4, 1/2, 1/8, 1/16, 0, and 1. So that represents all 6 sides of the dice, okay? So like little stickers, do you find I would just take a regular dice that we would use playing a game, and I would take like garage sale stickers, and I would just kind of like figure out how to get those to stick on those little round ones. So 1, you're gonna label each for whatever piece you have, and then you're also gonna add a 0 on there. So you're gonna roll your die, and the first person to cover up your entire whole number wins. So you're gonna have a set, and then like your sibling's gonna have a set, because right, we're social distancing, so you're not gonna like play with your friends unless you're social distancing with your friends like we are, our neighbors, then they could play together. And so they're gonna roll the dice, and let's say they roll 1/4. So guess what? Gonna put a 1/4 on it. They're like, yeah, I'm so excited. That's the biggest one. Wait, no, half is, okay? So then after that, they're gonna roll, their friend's gonna go, they're gonna roll again, and they get 1/2. So then they're like, yes, like I'm almost to a whole, like this is awesome, so good. Okay, then friend goes, and then they go, and they get a 1/2 again. And they're like, oh, dang it. Well, a 1/2 is too big. That's not gonna work. So they lose a turn. Okay, friend goes, then you go. And so then you can, as your person is watching this, you can ask them like, okay, well, we can't do a 1/4. What are things that you could add? What are some combinations you could have? Well, I could do an 1/8, and I could do 2/16, and that would work. Or if I rolled, if I rolled another 1/4, that would work. If I did 2 8s, I could do that. So really they're wanting to roll nothing bigger than 1/4. And so once they've won, then they're good. And then I have them look and add up like, okay, well, what are ways that you can equal 1? Well, 1/4, 1/2, 1/8, and 1/8. Okay, well, what's another way to put that? Well, 2 8s equal 1/4. Okay, so then they're gonna measure that up. Okay, that's perfect. So it's just a way for kids to get used to using fractions, and it also gets in their head and helps them remember, because when you start teaching fractions to kids, a lot of times they see 1/16, and because the denominator is bigger, they're like, oh, 1/16, that's the biggest one. No, it's actually small because it's one little piece out of all these 16 pieces. And so it gets them something tangible to know. So it's great. Just having kids around second grade be able to make these pieces and just have them, decide like, how many different ways could you make 1/4? Well, how many 16ths would it take to cover this up? So then they're going to take all their little 16 pieces and be like, oh, well, it takes 4 16ths to equal 1/4. That's the same thing. So we're little kids, that's what you could do. Second grade is probably, second to third grade is where I would start with that. And then becoming into fourth grade, you can play this game where they're manipulating and moving things around. So if you guys have any questions about this, you can definitely send me a message. But if you're getting to fractions, because most math books and most schools around springtime, you start to work on fractions. So you may be feeling inadequate about how to teach that. And this is just one really, really great way to help you feel confident and empower, but then also make fractions fun for your kids and not a frustration. You guys, I hope this is helpful. Any questions, you can send me a message.